correctly. So hello and welcome to today's online seminar, which is jointly hosted by the International Council on Social Welfare and the International Association of Schools of Social Work. My name is Gloria Kerwin and I will moderate today's event. The title of today's seminar is Fostering Inclusive Communities, Addressing Barriers to Social Participation. And to help us consider this topic today in more detail, I am delighted to welcome a panel of leading experts who will share their views with us in this session. Our speakers today are Professor Lynn Healy, who is the main representative of the International Association of Schools of Social Work to the United Nations. Professor Dr. Antonio Lopez Pelaez from UNED, Spain. Kathleen Wabrovets from Deutscher Verein für öffentliche und private Vorsorge, Germany. Ms. Nicola Byrne, who is the Chief Executive Officer of SHINE, an organisation in Ireland. Professor P.K. Shahjahan from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in India, and Dr. Sergei Zelenev, who is President of the International Council on Social Welfare. The aim of the seminar today is to explore how inclusive participation can serve as a cornerstone of vibrant, equitable and cohesive communities. Through participatory processes, communities can develop more accurate diagnoses of social needs, co-design welfare systems and evaluate their impact. The transformative potential of participation, the role of local administration and strategies for addressing barriers to participation will be discussed, alongside topics such as building resilient communities through inclusive decision-making frameworks, leveraging technology and partnerships to break down barriers to community engagement, and co-designing public initiatives through effective partnerships between administrations, civil society and private sectors. Each speaker will have approximately 8 minutes for their presentation, and we will have time at the end of the presentations for questions and discussion. If you have a question, please write this in the chat. Use the chat function to write your question, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible before our session ends today. Please note that this seminar is being recorded and will be made publicly available. By continuing to attend this seminar online, you are giving your permission for this seminar to be recorded with your presence and disseminated as described. I would like to ask everyone to please mute their microphones unless they are talking directly in the session. So without further ado, because time is tight, I would like to hand over to Professor Lynn Healy from the International Association of Schools of Social Work. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you online. I'm sitting here in New York. I've been attending for the last couple of days the Commission on Social Development and hearing a lot of wonderful messages about social inclusion, upholding one of the pillars of the Copenhagen Declaration and looking forward to the Second World Social Summit. Although I've been hearing these wonderful messages for the last 2 days, I think this is actually a very challenging climate to discuss inclusion. Exclusionary rhetoric has intensified over the past few years and has turned into exclusionary policies in a number of countries. A prime target, of course, has been immigrants and refugees, where many countries have moved from welcome to barriers to exclude, with fortified fences, deportations, harassment, and even vilification. But exclusion has also targeted sexual minorities, racial groups, and we've seen an increased pushback against women's equality, another one of the Copenhagen commitments. In a grassroots outreach project that was just concluded by the grassroots subcommittee of the NGO Committee for Social Development, it yielded responses that underscore this point, and we'll be presenting some of those tomorrow in a side event. I apologize, this is not a great setup here in my hotel room. When asked to identify local priority issues moving toward the Second World Social Summit, a surprising number of respondents listed caste and discrimination and exclusion of other groups. Responses on caste discrimination came from countries as diverse as Kenya, India, the Gambia, Nepal, Pakistan, and Thailand. These exclusionary policies and rhetoric challenge the Second World Social Summit to address with renewed vigor the Copenhagen pillar of social inclusion. Encouraging participatory opportunities is key. Respondents to the survey I mentioned called for access to opportunities to participate and to direct their own decisions about their own lives. Our challenge then is to build participatory movements that transcend the barriers that divide people. At the same time, of course, we do need to push back against the rhetoric of division. As the Secretary General said a few years ago when commenting about the pushback on women's rights, we need to push back against the pushback. I love that phrase. Our side event today emphasizes building inclusive communities. And I think this is important as we suggest beginning at the community level to purposefully build inclusive structures and dismantle barriers to participation. I can cite a few simple examples of projects that I've seen that have yielded some success on this, and they show, very local level. There was a project in Hartford, Connecticut a few years ago, a city near where I live, to bridge the divides between immigrant populations and longtime residents. Small groups were put together to work on an agreed community problem. The project was actually led by the public library, and I think that was significant because it's a government institution. Although it's a government institution at the city level, it's one that's widely trusted as open to all and doesn't suffer from the same distrust in public institutions that we've seen grow. A disaster preparedness project in Jamaica after one of the devastating hurricanes brought community members together in a workshop on building disaster resilient structures. The project had a specific outcome of increased knowledge and skill in building hurricane resistant housing. But the community members also gained self-confidence and improved community cohesion as a result. Much as in the Hartford project, where members of the groups formed new relationships and learned to bridge some of the misconceptions about other groups. So although both of these examples did result in a specific product and improvement, the social inclusion outcome was at least as important, and in some cases perhaps more important, than the actual physical outcome of the project. As we said in our concept note, participation enables people to contribute to decisions that affect their lives and foster a sense of belonging, empowerment, and mutual trust. Even as a university professor on a real micro level of building these relationships across barriers, I sometimes randomly assign my graduate students into teams to work on projects. After observing that when I allowed them to choose their own groups, they tended to immediately coalesce with students most like themselves, almost as if there were magnets attached to them that led them to persons just like them. As a result of these, the students didn't like it at first, but as a result of this, new working relationships were formed, and students from minority groups who had often felt somewhat excluded in the classroom experienced greater satisfaction with the classroom climate. These efforts have encouraging results, but they're very small. One challenge is how to build participatory projects on a larger scale. Here in the UN space, we from the NGOs advocate for collaboration between governments and civil society and for more opportunities to participate, even though we observe what seems to be a shrinking space for civil society. At the community level, there are more feasible opportunities for local governments and civil society groups to work together toward common ends. That said, ensuring broad-based participation requires work. Special outreach efforts are needed to secure participation of marginalized groups who may feel unwelcome or not trust the genuineness of the effort. However, we do have examples, and I've shared a few very tiny ones, that demonstrate that the effort can yield positive results for individuals and for communities. So I think I'll stop there because we have a lot of speakers and I'd like us to try to get through everybody and have time to dialogue with our audience. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Lynn Healy. A great presentation to start off today's seminar. I'm going to move on then swiftly because time is of the essence and invite Professor Antonio Lopez Pelaez as our second speaker. We were to be joined by another speaker also from Spain, the Mayor of Ronda, Maria de la Paz Fernandez Lobato. She has sent her apologies for today's session. So, Professor Lopez, we are with you now, and I know that you are going to speak on behalf of both you and the Mayor. So, thank you very much. And you are on mute.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gloria. Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to participate in this event with all of you, colleagues and attendees. And the topic seems particularly relevant to me. Building inclusive communities in polarized societies like ours, it is a crucial challenge for our welfare systems. No? I have been working in the field of participation and group dynamics for more than 20 years as professor of social work in Spain. And since 2020, I have served as ED of the ICSW and as co-director of the Participatory Group, a collaborative network for sharing good practices in the field of participation and fostering communities, of which more than 50 cities around the world are working with. And finally, in 2024 and 2025, I'm working with the ICSW, the Regional Administration of Málaga, the Diputación de Málaga in Spanish, and the Mayor of Ronda, Ayuntamiento de Ronda, on the future Ronda Declaration on Citizen Participation and Social Welfare. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Regional Administration of Málaga for its support to ICSW projects related to citizen participation. In the last 3 years, we have launched from the ICSW in cooperation with the International Association of School of Social Work and with governments and local administrations, the ICSW Windhoek Declaration in Namibia, focused on strengthening social protection in Africa, and the ICSW Lisbon Declaration, supported by the International Federation of Social Workers and the International Association of School of Social Work, focused on digital tools and support to groups at risk, where citizen participation is also very relevant. In democratic societies, the legitimacy of our political and social welfare systems is based on citizen participation. The sustainability of our social protection system is also linked to citizen participation. If we are citizens, we must participate. And decision-making systems that do not take citizens into consideration do not achieve the commitment of citizens to maintain them over time. In short, sustainability and legitimacy are based on citizen participation, and without it, our welfare system falls into crisis. In the research projects we carry out in the recent years, for example, the Camus project, citizen auditors, and municipal and local services against structural discrimination funded by the European Union, and of which I have been the main investigator, we have been able to diagnose the forms, the ways of structural discrimination in local administrations, where social workers work every day in the social service system. And we have validated strategies for citizen participation, such as citizen auditors, which allow us to confront these processes of discrimination and reverse them. Caring for communities and promoting social inclusion from the perspective of social services force us to reveal what is hiding in plain sight. Not all communities are the same. On a planet where much of the population lives in urban environments, rural environments are often left out of our analysis. Rural populations are affected by population displacement, aging, mobility, and communication difficulties. The dispersion of the population in rural settings makes the provision of basic services, health, education, social services more costly economically, and the problems of unwanted loneliness are accentuated in isolated and geographically distant environments. That is why we have launched a participatory process to identify the main problems affecting social services in rural areas and to bring good practices and strategies to the table. Some of the questions that we work on the Ronda Declaration seek to answer the following questions. How to strengthen the role of citizen participation in social services in isolated areas. How to improve local administration through participatory processes. What are the main strategies to setting good practices in the field of unwanted loneliness and isolation in rural areas? How to improve the strengthening of participation in the digital realm. To the Ronda Declaration, ICSW asserts the following principles regarding citizen participation. The right to participation as universal human right. The right to full participation in decisions affecting one's life is a universal human right and a pathway to well-being. Full and equal participation also builds social and economic capital, fostering societal capacities. Citizen participation for diagnosis. Participation ensures more accurate diagnosis of social needs. Legitimacy and trust in social protection. Engaging citizens in decision-making strengthens the legitimacy and implementation of social protection system, fostering trust in public institutions, and we need trust in these polarized societies. Effectiveness through participatory evaluation. Involving citizens in evaluating welfare services improve their effectiveness, reducing opportunities for corruption and abuse, preventing social protection, combating biases and discrimination, and digital inclusion, of course. In the digital age, equal access to information and services must be ensured, empowering people rather than marginalize them. Intergenerational solidarity. Participation bridges generational divides, fostering community cohesion. Co-design of welfare systems. Participation by citizens, civil society organizations, and both non-profit and for-profit entities ensures welfare systems are responsive and sustainable. In this sense, ICSW recommends the following action for local administrations in which the social workers worldwide are working every day. Implement participatory co-design processes, enhance social workers' competencies, provide continuous training, promote participation in rural areas, promote digital skills and competencies, compare and share best practices, engage in comparative analysis of participatory approaches worldwide, and commit to a society for all. Ensure all citizens are included as active participants in community life, beneficiaries of good governance. In short, participation is a key requirement for strengthening inclusive communities in the 21st century, including rural areas. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Antonio. A lot of detail and information for us in your presentation, very rich thoughts and insights. So I'm just going to encourage people as we progress through the speakers to begin to put your questions in the chat. Don't wait until the end, because it will give us a sense of the questions that are coming through and how many we will have at the end to address. So please begin to put your questions in the chat, even when the speakers are talking, and we will try and get to as many of your questions at the end as possible. So thank you very much, Dr. Antonio Lopez. We will move swiftly on to our next speakers. We are having a joint presentation from two speakers, one from Germany and from Ireland. So we will begin with Kathleen Wabrovets from Deutscher Verein für öffentliche und private for Sorga in Germany. And Kathleen, you'd speak for about 6 minutes, I think, and then we'll move to Nicola Byrne, who's the CEO of Shine in Ireland, for the second part of the presentation. So thank you, Kathleen, over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can understand me well. Yes, thank you very much for being able to present here our work at the Deutsche Verein für öffentliche und private Fürsorge, in English, German Association for Public and Private Welfare. As it is such a long name, and as you have your difficulties with it, I see this as a sign to say something about the German Association for Public and Private Welfare and what we are doing. So let me start with the first slide. Yes, thank you. Just to explain what this long name, what actually is behind this long name. We've been around for a while in Germany. We've been founded in 1818. And basically the association is a platform for relevant actors and stakeholders in social policy and social service delivery. So basically we gather in our membership everyone or every relevant actor that is involved in the implementation of social policy and social services. In Germany, we have the system. I have to explain this. It's a bit peculiar. We have the municipalities being in charge for social service provision. So they provide the resources for it, but the actual implementation of the social services is being done by mostly not-for-profit organizations and not-for-profit social service providers. And this also reflects in our membership. So we have around about 2,000 municipalities, welfare organizations, and service providers. We are active in all kinds of fields that in regards to social policy, try to reflect all groups that are in need of support of services in order to have them being able to participate and find their way into society. So we were discussing how we can visualize this in the best way, how we actually work on having inclusive communities and creating a chance for social participation. We decided to showcase two concrete projects, or let's say approaches, on how social service provision is being planned in cooperation with beneficiaries and target audiences, with the aim of creating inclusive environments and communities. This is not like a project level based work. This is more like the institutional way, an institutionalized form of participation. So we have the first example here in this first slide, which is the local social planning process. In German, this wonderful long name of kommunale Sozialplanung. We Germans, we really love long names and long words. Yes, and it's basically based on municipalities being obliged to offer social services and infrastructures like timely and efficiently. So everyone who is in need of support should be able to receive the support. And this way of planning social services is practiced by local administrations, and the very important part, based on the participation and the partnership with all relevant stakeholders. And this is particularly those actors I already mentioned, the not-for-profit social service providers, NGOs who are working with beneficiaries, and local actors that are important to reach those communities that are marginalized or or being a bit excluded of the community. So it is very important. This process is very important as it enables beneficiaries to share their experience and also have recommendations for the future delivery of services and how services can be adapted to their needs and to their to their how it can actually help them in their situation. Basically, it's very much data-driven. It's very much a data-based approach. So basically, they are collecting a lot of data on the implementation that has been being done, and based on those data, they try to provide better services. Yes, and there's one specific project we wanted to mention here. We already showcased this in a couple of platforms, which is like an application, an app that is focusing on, it's called Focus PI from the county of Pinneberg, and basically tries to use the experiences that are there and the data that is there to lower barriers to participation. The second example I want to show you focuses particularly on young people. And this is, as we just had a more data-based approach, this is more lived experienced approach. So basically, this is a very institutionalized way of young people being able to participate in decision-making processes at municipality level. Again, they are obliged to do that, so this is a very well-established form of participation. And basically brings together the decision makers of public administrations with the providers of services, and particularly, of course, the young people themselves in the form of youth organizations who can participate in this process. It's a co-creation process here, so they have conversations and advise public administrations on how to provide support and services to children and young people. Basically, they are like evaluating service provision and try to identify needs and challenges that are being faced by young people, and then together formulate work plans and targets to address those needs. And then they advise the decision makers on how they can better address the identified problems. And basically, they are involving not only youth organizations itself, it depends a bit on the respective municipality, but they can also involve the general public. It depends a bit on how it is set up. Yeah, there is a bit of a challenge, as it is a well-established process to really reflect the entire community, because usually when things are as institutionalized as this is, then sometimes like new associations or new forms of organizations are not very well reflected in it, but at least it is a very secure and secure way to ensure this participation and include this participatory way in a long-term planning of support services. Yes, so basically those are my two examples, and this is also like for the short time slot I think quite a broad overview. I'm happy to answer questions, and thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you very much, Kathleen. Very interesting and very insightful overview to the range of strategies that are being used to enhance participation. And I think already we're getting some questions in the chat that we will come back to later in relation to your presentation. But I'm going to move swiftly on now to Ms. Nicola Byrne, who is the Chief Executive Officer of SHINE, which is a national organisation in Ireland. But I will let Nicola explain all of that in her presentation. So over to you, Nicola. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I hope you can see my presentation? Great. And
Yes.
thank you for the opportunity to speak here about the work that we do at SHINE. I'm a social worker by background. I'm still a registered social worker, but I'm CEO of an organisation called SHINE. And SHINE has been going in Ireland since the 1970s. It was originally set up by a group of family members who had children who experienced schizophrenia. Since then, we've grown and developed and taken on much more of a significant programme of work in Ireland. I'm just going to see if I can get the screen to move. Yes. So in looking at the work and the theme for today, I wanted to talk to you about some of the ways that we're a mental health organisation and some of the ways that we have looked to promote inclusiveness and increase social welfare for people. And so mental health and social welfare are ultimately intrinsically interconnected, and inclusive decision making, we know from all of the evidence, improves outcomes. So SHINE aligns with principles that are outlined in the likes of the Rhondda Declaration, and we use a lot of our work to promote participatory initiatives using peer-led recovery and advocacy work. So we do this in 3 pillars, I would describe them as. So we use peer inclusion to improve engagement and recovery. Some of the ways we do that is we've grouped together people who have lived experience to form a program called the Voice Platform. So we now have an organised avenue for academics, service designers, government, anybody who needs to engage with people with lived experience to get their opinion, their idea, and their understanding of how things can be improved, and put the voice of people with lived experience and their supporters or family members at the centre of the work that they are doing. I'm going to speak to you in more detail. I'm going to give you one specific example similar to what Kathleen was talking about. I'm going to talk to you about the work we do with the reference group. And that is a reference group that is at the centre of national mental health policy. It's a group of people with lived experience and family members or supporters that actually look at national mental health policy and its implementation plan and its progress, and work with the Department of Health and all of the people involved in that work. In our second pillar, we host the National Stigma Reduction Programme in Ireland, and we do a lot of our stigma reduction work through social contact. And we know, even from the latest research, that social contact is the biggest way to make a difference in people's understanding of this issue. So we run the National Green Ribbon campaign in Ireland. We have a 6-step workplace programme that we offer to employers for free up and down the country to improve people's understanding and engagement and experience of living with mental illness in Ireland and being able to function at your optimal level. We have an ambassador programme as part of that, which is people who are trained with lived experience to go in and talk about their own experiences. In our third pillar, we offer frontline services, one-to-one work groups, education. But as part of that, our groups are organised by people with lived experience, for people with lived experience. Similarly, we've separate groups for family members, and then we've education programmes that are co-produced and peer-led. In looking to the theme of today's presentation, I wanted to talk about removing barriers, and in our experience, how do we remove those barriers? Very much so, it is based in tackling bias and discrimination in services. We need to do this in a number of different ways. Reducing stigma increases access to support, it increases recovery rates and reduces risk of suicide. We also know that public education fosters inclusion and policy improvement. And we have a national media programme that actually supports and works with the media around responsible reporting. And we do know now that a lot of people get their information and their idea and their understanding about issues such as mental illness from the media and how it's reported on. So we work with the media in Ireland to do that in lots of different ways. We've awards, we've training, we actually monitor the media, and we even are in partnership with the Carter Foundation and offer journalism fellowships. We also know that to remove barriers, social contact is key. It bridges divisions. And finally, social cohesion strengthens participatory welfare systems. So this work is very, very important. In the example I wanted to talk about today, the reference group, Ireland has a national mental health policy that is 10 years in duration. It's done that way so that it paces political turnover and that it's a whole of government response. In it, it has 100 actions. And at the centre of that is a committee called the National Implementation Monitoring Committee. And they review all of the progress of the implementation of this policy. However, the government and the Department of Health in Ireland decided to look at implementation differently. And at the centre of this is a group that SHINE acts as secretariat and support for. And we went out and we recruited a group of people who there was originally 12, we grew it to 14 because we find that there is regular turnover, and also we wanted to increase opportunities for diversity and harder to reach communities. And so the number 14 made more sense to us when we got down to actually practicing this work. So the government produces and the health departments produce reports on the work and how the policy is being progressed. And the first people to get that report in draft format is actually our reference group. And they really work hard in understanding and improving how reports are done, and questioning when a government department says something has been delivered or implemented, has it been genuinely delivered, looking at really debating the issues, teasing out what success looks like. And it's been a really successful way of working across different NGOs and the government and with the public in ensuring that an implementation plan that's of a significant importance in this country is delivered on. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to move on, and I'm sure I'll welcome any questions on the reference group. We're now in our 3rd year of it, and it's really made a significant difference, and all of the stakeholders are very supportive. It has been challenging, it has not been easy, and it's really made a difference to how the plan and success is measured. I suppose some of the points I want to raise from all of the work that we do in SHINE, and it really speaks to the Rhondda Declaration and the work around inclusion. Authentic inclusion is really important. It's easy to talk about inclusion, but the biggest fear we've met in any group or any individual that gets involved in working with us is they don't want it to be tokenistic. They want it to be authentic, and they want to make a real difference and feel heard. And sometimes that interaction involves actually understanding the challenges that government have and departments have in delivering on different actions and targets. So I would say to you, authentic inclusion in the real world and the digital one is not that different. And so it's important that you support and resource for inclusion, and it's rolled out and expanded ethically and appropriately, that you ensure accessibility for underserved communities, and that you innovate in partnership, enabling participation in service design and feedback. I have just some recommendations there, and I'm conscious of time. I would ask that you think to institutionalize peer-led work, that you expand digital participation models appropriately. For example, be conscious, say in the likes of somebody who has a mental illness, if they are paranoid, maybe working online is not appropriate, and it actually feeds into their stress and distress. It's also important to strengthen participation evaluation practices to combat the stigma associated with any of the challenges, and to secure funding for community-based initiatives. So in conclusion, I would say SHINE's experience illustrates the usefulness and benefits of the Rhondda Declaration's principles. Participation enhances the legitimacy, effectiveness and accessibility, and our future welfare systems must centre on an inclusive, community-driven model. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nicola and Kathleen. A huge amount of information imparted really succinctly and clearly for us, and I'm sure this is going to generate some questions. So please, everybody in our audience, if you want to begin to put your questions into the chat, and we will come to them hopefully before we finish today. So thank you very much, Nicola and Kathleen, for some very useful and concrete country examples of the work that we are interested in discussing today. Again, in the interest of time, I have to move quickly on to our next speaker, and that is Professor P.K. Shahjahan from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in India. Professor Shahjahan, the floor is yours. Thank you. And you're on mute. Yes.
Thank you, Gloria, and the panelists. Excellent discussions on participation, and very live examples from across the world makes me more enriched today. I'm a professor of social work for faculty of social work for almost 25 years, but I would consider as a student of community and community participation for life. The reason why I'm saying this is that every every day when I go to class, every day when I engage with different communities and various projects in the field, I get new ideas of participation and get more challenging questions to deal with for participation. And particularly, I would just start with a very, very recent study which I have done in the city of Mumbai on a very, very large mega development project in the city, which is almost costing around $267 million US. It is a coastal road project, a road project which is running through the coastal area of the Mumbai city, which is to reduce the transportation chaos in the city and connecting the city of from one end to the other end. But in the process, what was happening was significantly affecting the livelihoods of fisherfolk communities in the city of Mumbai. You may think that a city of 13, 14 million people in the city, where could be the fishermen? There are fishing harbors in the city, which two of these harbors have been seriously affected by it. When we are doing, the study was actually to develop a compensation policy for fisherfolk affected by the community, by the development project. But what we ended up doing was a significant process of community participation. And that process of community participation actually led us to uncover a large number of people who are affected, probably may not be, as per the policies, they may not exist as affected communities. Like quite often we talk about fishing communities as fishermen. So quite often the men become the affected community, and the women who are doing marginal, so-called marginal engagement in the fishing sector, not essentially doing the fishing activity, but a lot of other supportive functions which are being done. Even fishing activities done by women in the intertidal areas and shallow waters are not anywhere documented. So when you are going to measure the impact of this project on this community, it was essentially going to be, as per the government records, there are boat owners and the people who are working in the fishing boat who will be considered. The women who are doing shallow water fishing, women who are doing fish selling, women who are doing maybe hand picking from the shallow waters, none of them will get represented. So when we were doing this project, I just show you the image of this report which we prepared, a compensation policy and its implementation plan for project affected fisherfolk of Mumbai Coastal Road project. The reason why I'm saying this is that through a participatory methodology, we have come out with a recent publication on this as well. Participatory methodology as a process for co-production of policies which affect communities. That is something which we have seen through this project. So this gave me, like I said earlier, while studying participation, I understand that the participation has to move beyond citizen participation. How do we move beyond citizen participation from a social policy or a social capital perspective of Bojo and Putnam, or for that matter, Robert Chambers talking about whose reality counts, and thereby who participates and how, to the sociology of absence by Boaventura de Sousa Santos, who talks about no social justice is possible without cognitive and epistemic justice. So coming from this perspective, I have three major ideas which I would like to quickly talk about in process of empowering communities and strengthening participation. How do we re-democratize democracy itself in the context of democratic backslides across the globe? How do we repoliticize the development? And finally, popular and long-term social and development policies as against populist policies. Finally, I would argue that I will explain a little bit because of a lack of time. I'm almost half past the time. When I'm talking about re-democratizing democracy, I'm referring to a democratic backsliding, which is coming through rising authoritarianism, weakening of civil liberties and press freedom across the world, corruption and weak rule of law, and culture of surveillance and digital invasion into privacy. All of these factors are actually creating significant hurdles for participation to actually work in a de-democratized society. we cannot expect participation to happen. So thereby, the threats to minority rights, inclusion, all of these things will become a reality for that matter. And there is a need to reclaim democratic spaces and processes, which I would say is a process of re-democratization. There are very interesting examples, like in UK, where you have an open petition system where the citizen can actually put a petition on the Parliament portal, and where if 10,000 people have signed for the petition, it will be acknowledged by the government. 100,000 people have signed, it will be discussed in the Parliament. This is a way of re-democratizing. How effectively it's working, it's a different matter of analysis. However, the idea that people participation cannot be limited to citizen participation, it has to be ingrained into the process of governance and governance structures. Similarly, in Estonia, you have the Digital Democracy and Transparency Initiative, which is actually the digital process, digitizing the whole entire land records and various other records and governance processes will actually make it possible, provided the digital divide doesn't keep some section of people away. Second point, which I was talking about, was the repoliticizing of development. Depoliticization of development has become one of the very, very significant process in a neoliberal development paradigm, which we are seeing, where global capital, infrastructure, and technology drives the entire aspect of development, which is invisibilizing aspects of inequality and exclusion, leading to something called development by exclusion. How do we repoliticize such an ugly form of development, which is, say, for example, in some parts of the world, including India, where we talk about jobless growth or rising inequality, as Thomas Piketty is talking about. These inequality and jobless growth are essentially a product of this depoliticized development processes. So we need to repoliticize development, which is referring to political and social questions into the development process that often get sidelined in traditional development models. And some glaring examples which we could see from Ecuador and Bolivia, where indigenous movement like Living Well approach, which is Sumak Kawose, which is living well, which the concept is rooted in indigenous Andean principles of focusing on collective well-being, sustainability, balance with nature, rather than individual wealth and economic growth. So this repoliticizes development, questioning the Western frameworks of growth and focusing on indigenous knowledge systems and rights. This is integrated into the Constitution as well. Now, similarly, right to information in movement in India, also similar example. I'm not getting into this. I've already overshot time by a few seconds. One last point which I will highlight and then stop this. The populist policies are becoming a big drain on resources, but also it is depoliticizing development in a big way, because welfare, the populist welfare measures are used as a political tool for constituency building, and the ideas of development and inclusion get sidelined in this process. So how do we reimagine participation, not only people's participation through mechanisms devised at the grassroots, but synchronized into the global social policies, statecraft, and governance? In this particular project, which I mentioned in the beginning, we actually engaged with the district city administration and made this policy as a landmark policy, where we were trying to bring sustainable development goals, where we were talking about how do we leave behind the fisher folk living in the city when you're talking about development. So we try to bring in such discourses where we conceptualize this as people-centered social innovation as a way forward for popularizing participation and democratizing governance. So participation is inherently a political concept. We need to repoliticize participation. We need to get the participation in the governance and governmentality as well. I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Shahjahan. So many important ideas, and you really managed to stick within time, but I know there's a lot more there that we could talk about. So thank you so much for being able to bring all of those ideas together into the short presentation. It's really valuable. Hopefully we'll have time to come back with some questions related to your presentation before we finish today. But we do need to move on to our last but not least presenter, Dr. Sergei Zelenev, who is the president of the International Council on Social Welfare. Professor Zelenev, I will hand over to you now, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Thank you so much, colleague, for these exceptionally interesting presentations. I would say the canvas is so rich that it is very difficult even to pinpoint the most important issues which have been raised, because all of them are important. What I would like to say outright that we clearly see here presentations based on evidence, and ICSW always tried to put forward policy prescriptions and approach policies in a cohesive, integrative, and evidence-based manner. So in this sense, I believe that all of your presentations fit very well into the general philosophy of ICSW. Before my today's presentation is partially based on the feedback from the regions which we got from ICSW organizations in preparing for on the declaration and in getting general feedback ideas regarding the future challenges. Before going into how to improve local administration through participatory process, and I would like to concentrate more on social services today, I would like to strengthen three issues which to me come from most of your speeches today. First of all, that citizen participation is at the heart of effective and responsive social services. And that it is obvious then when people have a say in the planning, implementation, and the evaluation of these services, then they become more inclusive and adaptable and aligned with needs and aspirations. So the other point which comes to me when I was listening to all of you is that beyond improving service delivery, participation also fosters a sense of shared responsibility. And this is important then to underscore that when communities are actively involved, they feel ownership over social policies and programs, which strengthen social cohesion and resilience. Finally, I would say that this social participation is particularly important in times of crisis, when trust in public institutions is quite low, when we are seeing polarization in many countries. And this is particularly important if we pay attention to this. But for local admin, let me just discuss certain points which I bring to your attention. From local administration to truly benefit from citizen participation, what could be done? What kind of steps are necessary? In my view, they must create structured and meaningful avenues for engagement, and municipalities and the local administration in general. And thinking about the strategies, how it could be achieved, I would mention four main points. Number one, it is establishing a very clear channels for input. Local governments should set up formal mechanisms such as community forums, advisory committees, or public consultations. In this sense, these spaces provide citizens with regular opportunities to contribute to decision-making in a very constructive way, and, very important, in a very transparent way. Another point, which is really a crucial point for many social policies, is training for local officials. I believe that probably Nicola will already mention some points in this regard, and some other presenters also, and Kathleen also, I think, mentioned this. That participation is most effective when local officials are equipped with the skills to engage with citizens. And training programs in this sense should aim at fostering dialogue, at handling very different viewpoints, because they may be quite different, and ensuring that citizen contribution are valued and they are not forgotten. The third point in this regard, which I would like to mention, is collaboration with civil society. Non-governmental organizations and community organizations in many countries of the world, I would say almost everywhere, play a crucial role in reaching marginalized groups and ensuring that all voices are heard. So by working together, local administrations and civil society can make a participatory process more inclusive and effective. And the last but not least, what I would mention this as a feedback loop, which means that engagement should not be a one-time event. If it is a one-time event, it is probably doomed to failure because it will be forgotten the next day. But if the system is created for continuous feedback, when governments can learn and listen, local governments in particular, because we are talking a lot of participation at the local level and local service delivery, they can refine their approaches, adapt policies based on the citizens' evolving needs. And they are also able to see these evolving needs because of this feedback loop. So this strengthens accountability and trust between the government and communities. Let me say a few words about good practices that could be shared. Well, there are numerous practices, and I believe that they are very specific to country level, to countries, to histories, to values which are existing in every context. But I would mention several of them which I believe are successful examples of participatory approaches, and they may be served as models for others. So among those, I would, on the first place, I would put participatory budgeting. In many cities around the world, citizens are directly involved in deciding how a portion of public budget is allocated. This practice makes financial decisions more transparent and ensures that resources reflect community priorities. Another point is that I already briefly mentioned before, but I would like to reiterate it. This is a community needs assessment. Regular assessments conducted in partnerships with the local non-governmental organizations help governments identify emerging social needs and tailor services accordingly. We have been discussing this issue working on the Ronda Declaration, because this became one of the most important points of the Ronda Declaration. Another issue, which is a sign of the time, and I believe that it is crucial, is the issue of digital feedback platforms. Online tools enable citizens to provide feedback on services, and sometimes do it in real time. So this method is especially useful for those who may not be able to attend in-person meeting, but still want to make a contribution, still want to contribute to policy discussions. And another very truly important point, and again, several speakers mentioned this. This is inclusion of vulnerable populations. Ensuring that participation is truly representative means setting priorities for outreach to groups that are often overlooked. First of all, as Nicola mentioned, is people with disabilities, but it's also older persons, it's lower income families, as Kathleen was mentioning. So partnerships with advocacy groups help make sure their voices, the voices of people, are heard. And the last point which I wanted to mention, and then I think that we have some time for group discussion, is participation in the digital environment. We all know that we are living through unbelievable times, the times of artificial intelligence, of many innovations, and this digital revolution offers exciting opportunities for broadening citizen participation. Online platforms and social media and mobile applications clearly make engagements much easier, more dynamic, and more accessible. So digital tools allow governments to collect real-time feedback and conduct surveys and be on top, including even holding virtual town halls meeting. So all in all, the issue of the digital engagement is crucially important, but there are two caveats. We need to keep in mind that the digital divide is an important issue, and it is very much there, that not all citizens have equal access to technology, and governments must invest in this sense, expanding internet access and providing digital training and so on. And the issue is, of course, data privacy and security, because citizens need to trust that their information is protected very well. So I stop at this. Those are points which I just wanted to mention in the context of service delivery and citizens' participation. And I would say that at this point, ICSW is finalizing the manifesto, which we will be submitting to Second World Summit for Social Development, and many points which we discuss now will find its reflection in this manifesto. It will be a joint venture of ICSW, of all organizations, regional and global, and we are working on this. And thank you so much for our regular partners in organizing these side events, International Association of the Schools of Social Work and Professor of Lynn Healy in particular. It makes this engagement truly important and wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sergey. And sorry to all the presenters for putting you under time pressure, because some very really valuable and insightful points being made by everybody. And I think, Sergey, also you managed to summarize or, bring together some of the points that people had made and integrate them really into some of your comments. So thank you very much. We have covered a huge amount of ground in the space of an hour, and I'm really glad we're recording this session and that it will be available, because I certainly will want to listen back again to all the presentations today. But before we finish, we do have time for some questions, and I do see people have posted some questions, and there's still time to do that. So just to try and include everybody as much as we can in the time frame, we have about 6 or 7 minutes really left. So if the questions can be brief and if the answers could be as succinct as possible, that would be really helpful. So I will just go in the order that they've been posted. The first question is from Kudor Snell, who is asking, what kind of social services are provided by LSP? I think, Kathleen, that may have been for you. Yes, so go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. Basically, this planning process is a process to decide on what to focus on. So, based on the data that I have were gathered on the base of the service provision, they can see what the actual needs are, and based on this on those identified needs, they try to steer the social service provision a bit more. So, for example, if they see that in certain districts of the city there is a more need, for example, for migrant counseling, then they will involve this in their budget planning, and then provide more budget for certain services. So, if in another county, in another area, there is more need for child services, then they try to plan the budget accordingly. So this is basically a process to that helps to focus what kind of services are being delivered.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathleen. And actually, the next question is also for you. The question is, could you explain a little bit more about your good practices regarding youth participation? So maybe you'll pick out one or two of the key points there for us. Thank you.
Yes. I mean, municipalities are there obliged to do it, and so of course the way it is implemented, how those youth participation processes are implemented can differ. But I saw this question and decided to mention one very nice example I see in my district where I am living. Basically, they enable young people that are participating in this kind of committee to decide on their own projects with a small budget. So they are providing a small budget for youth activities, and then those people and organizations that are represented there can decide what they want to do with it. And I think this is a very nice example to promote active citizenship and to engage people really in this kind of local level administration and decision-making processes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll move swiftly on to the next question from Emilio Diaz to Nicola Byrne. And the question is, could you expand a little on your experience with digital participation? And again, we're limited for time, so if we can have a brief reply. Thank you.
Well, my first thing to say is digital participation is not a case of one size fits all. It's really important to bear that in mind, and that there's issues like digital literacy, internet access, affordability, and even around people's own needs around neurodiversity and stuff like that has to be borne in mind. And I would say too that it's really important that we have a tailor-made approach when you're involving people and working in a digital participation. You have to think through the individual and their needs. So for us, say in the group that we were working with, the reference group, we went with everybody individually and looked at their own needs and gave them the tools, the resources, the support that would really help them to be able to function at the best of their ability, and adapted each plan to each individual person. And some people had IT backgrounds and they could teach the rest of us how to do things. And then other people had very little experience of working on platforms. So it was to work around different needs. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm going to move on. We have another question from Jeanette Schmidt. Jeanette, we have a long question here. I'm hoping that the presenters have had time to read through the various points you're making there, but I'm actually going to scroll down to the end, because what you're raising a very important point about, are there people who maybe will not be included in participatory processes via the model that is being discussed, and particularly the word citizen. So if we talk about citizen participation, does that in effect exclude people? I hope I'm interpreting your question correctly, and please feel free to raise your hand if I'm not. But I throw that out to the presenters. Is there anyone? Sergio, you are mentioned in the question, but maybe some of the other presenters might like that as well. Professor Healy, your hand is up, and take the floor. Thank you. Now you're on mute.
There.
Yeah. Yes.
No,
I
think this is a challenging topic. We have had some experience with that in my arena, and also in the university, where we have tried to reach out to the undocumented community because I think that their perspectives on their experiences are very important. There have been instances in which even someone have been invited to speak in our state legislature. I don't think we would do that in the current environment over the last 3 weeks in the United States, but we had done it previously with guarantees of, some protections with state legislators actually accompanying the undocumented person. But many times it has to be, you don't advertise, you reach out, you ensure that there's no risk to the individual. I think that is really the primary thing. But it's a critical community to hear from in terms of what are their experiences, what are their hopes for the future. I remember one of our own students who was undocumented who said, growing up undocumented in the United States is like window shopping at life. You can look at it, but you can't really purchase it or experience it. Her mother told her at the age of 16 that no, she couldn't get a driver's license because she was undocumented. She hadn't realized that until she was 16. She'd come as a small child. So I think unless you can, ensure people's safety, you're not going to get the perspectives, but their perspectives are critical. Some of the examples I gave, they're difficult to do with an undocumented population, because by engaging them with other groups, you don't know whether the undocumented persons can be safe. So I would just underscore that, but I think it's critical to try, but the issue of trust is obviously also predominant.
Yeah. Trust and well-being. Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Healy. And Professor Shah Jahan, please, your hand is raised.
Yeah, just quickly about the politicized process of participatory engagement. I'm essentially mentioning about when I mentioned about participation beyond citizen participation, the idea of citizen participation, I was essentially talking about people co-creating policies, people co-create governance models. I did not mention about in my presentation, but a very, very popular example from southern part of India, a state called Kerala, where a very, very big poverty alleviation mission driven by the state, but completely driven by the women. So about 300,000 women are being mobilized around this to develop a policy for poverty alleviation and through entrepreneurship and women empowerment. So it also talks about how women coming through these entrepreneurial activities are getting into political processes by getting elected to the local governments as elected representatives. So it leads to social development, to economic development, to political engagement. So that's how the politicized participatory processes is defining. So India, with such large amount of inequality and developmental issues, we need a more of a politicized participatory engagement rather than people participating in government so-called designed programs how they will participate in the government programs in implementing, delivering welfare, rather than co-creating those policies by themselves, as I have explained in my study as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Shah Jahan. Thank you. I'm really conscious of our time. We're coming close to the end. There is a question on participation of older people, and I was going to ask Professor Lopez, who I know has worked in that. Is there any key nugget, key points that you would say in relation to including older people and intergenerational solidarity?
Okay, I think that it's very important question. Thank you for asking. From my point of view, the elderly is now one of the biggest problems. We have to take care of them, and they have to have access to the digital realm and have access to some kind of interchange with the youth. And we are developing several projects. I think that related to this question and the other question about the digital participation, we have to face the digital divide, no? We have to the digital access, the skills, and the digital vulnerability, and focus on the elderly. We have to develop a specific training program with them and to create some kind of team with the young people to work together and promote international solidarity, intergenerational solidarity. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Antonio. I am very conscious we have come to the end of our time. I do want to thank all our speakers. I think today's session has really raised our awareness about the importance of a critical appraisal of the conditions in which we try to work towards participation of different groups in society. And we've heard so many rich and very useful examples. Professor Healy started us today, and one of her phrases was to push back on the pushback, and that's one of my takeaways from today's session. But there were many other takeaways that we don't have time for me to summarize here. But I do think everybody spoke about the need to really understand the context in which participation is happening and to ensure that the conditions are right for people to safely participate and to have their preferences and their wishes heard and listened to within the processes that affect their lives. So I would like to thank all our speakers sincerely. I would like to thank Gonzalo Cavero, who supported us very smoothly with our technology and setting up and recording, etc. And particularly, I would like to thank all the participants for your attention, your questions, your engagement, and your participation today. Thank you very much.